Imani Caldwell's fingers slipped into the inner pocket of Silas Whitlock's black morning suit and froze on a crumpled envelope with her name on it. Inside, a safety deposit key and one sentence Evelyn Whitlock never meant to say out loud. Trust no one in the house, not even him. Hours later, the Chicago Tribune screams the headline, "Evelyn is dead, an accident on the BP pedestrian bridge." Silas comes home, breaks in front of Imani and whispers, "Stay tonight, just tonight." But why would Evelyn warn her about him? Like, subscribe and tell me, where are you watching from? Imani Caldwell was always careful when handling Silas Whitlock's wardrobe, not out of fear, but precision. She knew the feel of every fabric in that penthouse closet on Michigan Avenue. Italian wools from Canali, English blends from Savile Row, hand-pressed cottons that cost more than her monthly rent in Bronzeville. That night, while the storm crept in like wet breath against the tall windows, she reached into the inner lining of his black morning suit just as she'd done a dozen times before. But this time, her fingers brushed something foreign, not a receipt or a cufflink, but an envelope. Not sealed, not hidden, but left in that quiet, deliberate way that meant it was meant to be found. Her name was on it, printed by hand in blue ink. Underneath, a legal stamp from Blakemore, Rhodes and Hale, LLP. Her stomach dropped before she even opened it. Inside, a safe deposit key and a sentence written in the same hand, careful but rushed. "If I don't come back, trust no one in the house, not even him." No context, no signature, but she knew the handwriting, Evelyn's, and suddenly the silk of the jacket didn't feel expensive anymore. It felt like a warning she wasn't supposed to hear. Hours later, the snow had thickened over the city like a second skin. The wind off Lake Michigan whipped around the corners of Millennium Park as mourners funneled out of the memorial, all black coats and gloved hands gripping hot cups of coffee from the Caribou Coffee across from the Art Institute. Silas hadn't said much. He stood beneath the cloud gate, that mirrored sculpture tourists called the Bean, with the weight of grief settling behind his eyes but never spilling over. Imani stayed back, as always, not a guest, but not invisible either. She overheard a hushed conversation between one of the Whitlock board members and a woman from the Chicago Philanthropy Network. Something about Evelyn being distracted that week. Off her game. A bad night, maybe. But then the Chicago Tribune alert lit up her phone. Whitlock heiress dies in fall from BP pedestrian bridge. Police call it accidental. She froze beneath the arch of Monroe Street Station. Evelyn had been terrified of heights. Imani knew that from Tuesday mornings, when she wouldn't even lean over the railing of the penthouse terrace, not even with Silas beside her. Imani stared at the headline, then back at the man they now called a widower, and for the first time she felt something like nausea whisper through her ribs. They didn't speak on the drive back. The Tesla Model S, sleek and soundless, slid down Lakeshore Drive like it was floating. Silas drove himself, refused the driver, and Imani sat silently in the back seat, fingers clenched inside her gloves. The city was emptying out, as it did every time snow this heavy hit. She counted 3 plow trucks along Roosevelt Road, and the LED signs overhead warned of delays on the Red Line. Her class at Malcolm X College would start in under an hour, but she knew she wouldn't make it. Not tonight. Not after this. She clutched the envelope tighter inside her coat. The key inside it had teeth that bit into her palm. Silas didn't look at her when they reached the underground parking garage, didn't even ask if she needed a ride home. When the elevator doors opened into the penthouse, the first thing she noticed was the smell. Not flowers or cologne, but lemon oil and quiet. The kind of silence that wasn't natural. The kind that felt paused. Silas stopped at the end of the hallway, turned just enough for her to see the roar under his eyes, and said it so softly she nearly missed it. "Stay tonight. Just tonight." Imani didn't answer at first. She stood in the living room, staring at the spot where Evelyn's favorite orchid used to sit, the white one from Gethsemane Garden Center that never bloomed in winter, but Evelyn kept it anyway. She wanted to say no. Her textbooks were still in her locker on campus. Her pre-test quiz on American political theory was due by midnight, and she hadn't even started the reading. But something about Silas's voice stopped her. It wasn't command. It was collapse. She followed him down the corridor, past the guest suite and toward the kitchen. He moved like he'd forgotten how to walk through his own home. He poured 2 glasses of filtered water, then left both untouched. They said she leaned, he said finally, hands resting on the marble counter. Just leaned and slipped. Imani stared at him. That bridge has 5-foot railings, she said. It was the most she'd spoken to him in weeks. He didn't flinch. I know, he replied. She wasn't alone. They didn't sleep. Silas paced between rooms, leaving lights on behind him. Imani sat on the edge of the couch, fully dressed, heart pounding. Around 3:12 a.m., one of the security panels on the wall blinked red. Motion in the stairwell. It shouldn't have been possible. The private floors had biometric access. Silas grabbed his phone, called down to concierge, got nothing but static. By the time security arrived 22 minutes later, the motion was gone. No breach, no entry. But Evelyn's bedroom door, the one sealed since the memorial team had cleared her things, now stood slightly ajar. Silas swore he hadn't touched it. The handle was warm. Imani stepped closer, fingers trembling. Inside, nothing was out of place. But her eyes locked on one thing: Evelyn's cell phone, a Google Pixel 6, the coral pink one, now resting face down on the nightstand. Imani had packed it away herself 3 days ago into the storage bin marked personal. She backed out of the room without touching it. She didn't ask how it got there. She didn't need to. By dawn, the snow was waist-deep against the curb outside. Silas hadn't said another word. He sat near the window, staring down at the icy veins of Michigan Avenue like they were going to spell something out for him. Imani stood behind him for a moment, unsure if he even remembered she was still there. She thought of leaving, of grabbing her boots, heading for the CTA stop on State Street, catching the next train south even if it meant standing all the way. But when she turned, she saw something that stopped her. The envelope, now on the table, open and empty, as if Silas had found it. But his eyes weren't angry. They were hollow. "You were never supposed to see that," he said. She didn't reply. The truth hung between them like frost on glass, visible, delicate, and ready to break. Whatever Evelyn feared, it hadn't ended with her fall. And Imani understood something simple and irreversible. Staying that night hadn't been about compassion. It had been about crossing into a storm she didn't cause, but now couldn't leave untouched. By the time the sun finally bruised the sky, the snow had buried everything from the bronze lion statues outside the Art Institute to the sidewalk benches along Lakeshore Drive. Inside the penthouse, the heat was on full blast, but Silas Whitlock moved, as if the cold had settled somewhere deeper, somewhere central. His hands trembled when he tried to make coffee, but couldn't bring himself to open the grinder. The bag of Intelligentsia Black Cat Espresso, the one Evelyn insisted on getting freshly ground every week from their stop in Logan Square, sat unopened on the counter. Imani watched from the hallway, unsure if she should offer help or pretend not to notice. She knew what grief did to men like him, men trained to control boardrooms, but not their own collapse. The morning after a death is never quiet, only stunned. Silas paced, checking his phone, putting it down, checking again. When Imani quietly mentioned that she needed to head to class, just a quick trip on the CTA Green Line to the Malcolm X College campus on Jackson Boulevard, he turned to her, lips slightly parted like he was about to argue. But instead, his voice cracked. "Please, just for today." No demand. No command, just a man with too much empty space around him. She didn't say yes, but she didn't leave. Imani kept telling herself it was temporary. One missed class wouldn't end her scholarship. She could email Professor Alvarez, explain something vague about family emergency. It wouldn't be the first lie she told to protect someone richer than her. That afternoon, while Silas holed himself up in his office on a video call with someone from Whitlock Ventures, she walked through the apartment with a cloth and lemon polish, doing the kind of cleaning that didn't need to be done. Wiping picture frames that didn't hold dust, straightening books on shelves no one touched. Her body moved out of instinct, but her mind circled one thought. The safe deposit key was still in her coat pocket. And every time she reached for her phone, the thought of that one sentence Evelyn had written, "Not even him," crept up like frostbite. Was Silas lying about not knowing? Or did he truly not expect that envelope to reach her hands? The worst part was that Imani didn't know which answer scared her more. When Silas emerged mid-afternoon, his tie half loosened and his eyes red but dry, he muttered something about Evelyn's sister calling. "She's asking about the funeral arrangements," he said. "She doesn't know we've already paid for everything." He didn't say who "we" was. Later that evening, while folding fresh towels in the guest bathroom, Imani caught the flicker of movement on the penthouse's central touchscreen security panel. She had seen it used dozens of times to call the concierge, check deliveries, track the arrival of house staff. But tonight, it pulsed red in the corner. "Service stairwell. Activity detected." She blinked. No one was supposed to be there. She touched the icon, and the still image that popped up showed nothing but a sliver of movement, like a shadow crossing between frames. Her first instinct wasn't fear. It was confirmation. Something had been off since Evelyn died, something beyond grief. Imani walked briskly to the foyer, where Silas was watching a muted replay of Evelyn's last speech at the Chicago Women's Impact Summit, held at the UIC Forum 3 months earlier. Her voice echoed through the apartment, even without sound. "There's someone in the building," Imani said. Silas looked up slowly. "What do you mean?" She showed him the image. He stood, suddenly alert. "Security doesn't use that stairwell after hours." A moment later, he was on the phone with building management, frustration thick in his voice. But when the guards arrived, 2 men in black jackets with 800 North Michigan embroidered in gold, they found no sign of forced entry, no theft, no prints. Just a thin trail of wet footprints that ended right outside Evelyn's sealed bedroom door. Imani didn't need to be told not to go in. The door had been closed all week, sealed even. She remembered the moment Evelyn's personal things were packed and labeled, her coral Google Pixel 6, her bottle of Le Labo perfume, the vintage fountain pen she kept beside the bed to jot down dreams. All of it had been carefully stored in a box marked "Private," to be retrieved by family, now resting in the penthouse's climate-controlled basement locker. But when Silas stepped forward, hand hovering near the knob, Imani stepped ahead of him. She pushed the door open slowly. Inside, the air didn't feel stale. It felt wrong, as if someone had been there. The lights were off, but the curtains had been moved, and on the nightstand, resting exactly where it shouldn't be, was Evelyn's phone. Imani stared at it. "Did you bring that up?" she asked. Silas shook his head too fast. "No," he whispered. "I didn't touch anything in here." Neither of them picked it up. Imani backed out of the room first, careful not to brush the walls, not to disturb the air. Her instincts weren't logical. They were old, inherited. "Don't touch the thing that's been placed for you to see." Silas didn't follow her out. He stayed in the doorway, staring at the shape of the room like it had betrayed him. Imani returned to the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water, her hand steady even though her chest felt like someone was sitting on it. She didn't drink it. She sat at the small bar island, opened her phone, and stared at the list of unread messages from classmates in her civics cohort. She typed and deleted a dozen replies. Finally, she wrote one line, "I won't make it tonight. Sorry." She turned the screen face down. When Silas finally returned, he looked different, not pale but hollow. He leaned against the counter, his voice low. "She used to tell me. She felt like people were listening." Imani didn't respond. "She said she thought someone had been copying her notes, her journals. I thought it was stress." His jaw tightened. "She told me not to trust anyone here, and I didn't ask her what she meant." The air between them thickened. He looked at Imani then, like he was seeing her clearly for the first time. "If you want to leave, I understand." Imani didn't say yes or no. She just looked at him, really looked, and realized whatever Evelyn had been afraid of, it hadn't been paranoia, it had been proximity. When night returned, there was no snow falling, only its silence left behind. The guards had done a sweep, but no explanation had come. Evelyn's phone was back in the box now, placed there by Imani herself. She had carried it down to the locker, key in hand, no words exchanged. Silas watched her do it and said nothing. When they returned upstairs, the door to Evelyn's room remained shut. Silas sat in the living room, jacket off, shirt sleeves rolled up to his forearms. "I should have asked her more questions," he murmured. Imani stood behind him, one hand gripping the back of a chair, the other clenched in her coat pocket. The key Evelyn left her still burned cold, not from the metal, from what it meant. She thought she'd been hired to clean, to serve. But now she realized she'd been placed. And if Evelyn was right, if someone inside the house was the threat, then the truth wasn't buried. It was walking around, living in the same halls, sleeping behind one of those doors. Imani didn't have evidence yet, but she had instinct. And for the first time, she understood she was no longer a bystander. She was part of the story. And stories like this, they didn't end with grief. They ended with answers. Imani didn't sleep. She waited until just before 5 a.m., when the snowplows had cleared enough of the roads for the CTA Green Line to start running again. She threw on her heaviest coat, grabbed the envelope from the false bottom of her drawer, and walked to the Ashland 163rd station with her scarf pulled up past her nose. The metal of the key Evelyn had left her pressed through her glove like it wanted to break skin. Every bump of the train ride downtown felt like a warning shot through her spine. She kept her head down, clutching her bag in one hand and using the other to scroll through her phone, as if nothing about her life had cracked open. She wasn't sure what she was going to find, only that the not knowing had started to rot something inside her. The safe deposit box was in a Wintrust Bank branch near Dearborn Street, hidden behind a row of glass doors and polite security guards who barely glanced at her once she flashed the access envelope. They offered her a private viewing room, white walls and no windows. The moment she turned the key, her stomach twisted. No money, no jewelry, just a flash drive in a clear plastic case, and a manila folder labeled EC Foundation Transfer Contingency. Her hands trembled as she connected the flash drive to the tablet the bank provided. It loaded a single audio file, time-stamped 4 nights before Evelyn's death. The voice was unmistakable. Evelyn, speaking softly, clearly recording in secret. "He thinks I'm asleep," she whispered. "But I saw him. I saw them. If anything happens to me." The rest was muffled. The sound of someone entering, a door creaking, a final exhale that made Imani's whole body lock up. She yanked the earbuds out, fingers numb. When she opened the folder, her world stopped. A notarized document signed by Evelyn named Imani Caldwell as the legal controller of the Whitlock Women's Futures Foundation, with full administrative rights and protection clauses against all board members, including Silas Whitlock. Her throat tightened. This wasn't a thank you. This wasn't even trust. It was strategy. She hadn't been hired to clean a house. She'd been placed there, planted in Evelyn's words, either as protection or as bait. The thought scraped the back of her teeth like panic. She folded the papers slowly, took a single photo with her Samsung Galaxy A52, and returned everything to the envelope. Her body wanted to run. Her mind wanted to scream. but she just stood there, breathing, while something broke and rebuilt itself inside her. It took almost an hour to get back to the penthouse. The wind had picked up again by the time she exited the Chicago Avenue station. She didn't bother texting Silas. She walked past the doorman, ignored the morning concierge's polite nod, and rode the elevator to the 56th floor in silence. When the doors opened, Silas was already waiting in the foyer. He didn't look surprised to see her. He looked like a man who hadn't moved all night. Same shirt, same expression, but different eyes. "You went," he said. Not a question. Imani didn't answer. She stepped inside, reached into her bag, and handed him the envelope without a word. He took it slowly, opened it, and read the top page. As his eyes skimmed the signature, the blood drained from his face. "She really did it," he muttered. "She actually named you." He didn't sound angry. He sounded ashamed. Imani watched him, and for the first time she didn't feel smaller. She felt heavier, rooted. "Did you know," she asked, "about the transfer?" Silas shook his head. "No. I knew she was scared. I didn't know she had a plan." His voice cracked on the last word. "I thought she was just being paranoid." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was loaded. Silas moved to the kitchen and poured 2 glasses of water, hands shaking worse than the night before. Imani sat at the small island, the memory of the audio file still crawling under her skin. "Who was she talking about?" she asked. "Who did she see?" Silas didn't answer right away. He picked up his glass, sipped, then set it down. "There were meetings. The board was pressuring her to expand into international markets. She didn't trust the direction. There were threats, subtle ones, lawsuits, legal maneuvers." He rubbed his eyes. "She started keeping notes in a separate notebook. She said she felt watched." Imani narrowed her eyes. "By who?" He looked up, tired. "People she shouldn't have trusted. People close." Imani stood. "Define close." Silas's mouth tightened. "You don't understand how deep this goes." She took a step forward. "Try me." He didn't say her name, but he didn't deny it either. And in that moment Imani saw it. Not guilt, not deception. Fear. And not just fear of who had gotten to Evelyn. Fear of what would happen if Imani decided not to play along. She turned to leave, not because she was done, but because staying longer would mean getting pulled into something she couldn't yet name. But before she reached the door, Silas called out, "You think I'm the villain in this?" She paused without turning. "I think you're protecting yourself." His voice hardened. "You have no idea what I've had to cover to keep this company alive." Imani finally turned to face him. "And you have no idea what it means to be used as a shield for a woman who's already dead." Her words hit harder than she intended, but she didn't take them back. Silas didn't argue. He looked at the papers again, then at her, and asked the question she wasn't ready for. "What are you going to do with this?" Imani didn't answer. She opened the door and stepped out into the hallway, heart pounding. She didn't know yet. But she knew one thing. If she didn't draw a line now, if she let this man's grief turn into a leash, she'd become the next version of Evelyn, trapped in a house full of secrets, watching her exit disappear one hallway at a time. Back in her small apartment on East 76th Street, Imani finally let herself breathe. The folder was tucked beneath her mattress, the audio copied and stored in 2 separate cloud accounts, one under her name, one under a pseudonym. She boiled water on her tiny GE coil-top stove, dropped in a bag of lemon ginger tea from Trader Joe's, and sat at her second-hand table without turning on the lights. The day hadn't just changed the direction of her life. It had changed its rules. She was no longer reacting. She was choosing. And whatever came next, press, danger, guilt, it would meet her standing. But one truth stayed lodged like a needle in her chest. She hadn't been chosen to be part of Evelyn's life. She'd been chosen to survive her death. And survival, she now understood, wasn't passive. It was a decision. One she would have to make every single day from here on out. Imani didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The power was in what she refused to be. Sitting across from Silas in the office of Hayworth and Daniels LLP, with the document folder between them and the audio file now logged officially into evidence, she said one sentence: "I will help uncover the truth, but I won't be anyone's bandage." Silas looked at her like he already knew what she meant, and maybe he did. There was no room left for control, not in the slow way he'd tried to shape their conversations, nor in the quiet ways grief had been pulling her closer to his orbit. "You're not a shadow," he said quietly. "You've been the only person in this house who saw what was happening while I refused to." She didn't respond with gratitude. She didn't soften. She just nodded and placed a condition. She would work with the attorneys and submit the documents, but she would not stay in the penthouse, would not be listed in the media, and she would not speak on Evelyn's behalf like she knew her. "This isn't my story," Imani said. "It's hers, and it's yours. I'm just the one holding the light on it." Submitting the documents wasn't dramatic, it was clinical. The attorney, a woman named Kendra Boyd, with salt-colored locks and a no-nonsense tone, processed the filing with methodical care. She connected Imani with a pro bono legal counselor from the Chicago Volunteer Legal Services Foundation, explaining that while Evelyn's signatures were airtight, the board would try to contest her authority. "You'll be a target," Kendra said, "not as a warning, but as a certainty. But that's how you know you've stepped into something real." Imani nodded. She'd known that since the moment she heard Evelyn's voice tremble through that recording. Silas sat through the meeting without interrupting, and when it ended, he walked her to the lobby and asked nothing. No requests. No guilt. Just silence. It was the first time he hadn't tried to fix something with his money. That alone said more than any apology ever could. Imani walked out into the cold with her scarf high over her face and didn't look back. She was done living in his house. That didn't mean she was done helping him stand. The foundation transfer became public within a week. Crane's Chicago business ran a short piece on the leadership shift at the Whitlock Women's Futures Foundation, naming Imani as interim executive director, citing Evelyn's legal wishes. The media didn't dig too deep. Not yet. But the board did. They called for emergency votes, issued statements questioning Evelyn's mental state, and tried to block access to funding channels. What they didn't count on was Silas standing beside her at the first hearing, not as a guardian, but as a witness. He didn't speak over her. He didn't speak for her. He simply confirmed the document's authenticity and stated that his wife had told him, weeks before her death, that she feared certain board members were funneling funds overseas without transparency. "I didn't listen then," he said, voice level, "but I'm listening now." Imani stood straighter hearing it, not because he defended her, but because he finally admitted what Evelyn needed him to. After the hearing, outside the Daily Center, Silas turned to her and said, "I should have fought for her before she was gone. I won't make the same mistake with you." She looked at him, calm. "Don't fight for me," she replied. "Just don't stand in my way." The Foundation's first initiative wasn't flashy. It didn't get picked up by news outlets or featured on morning shows. But for Imani, it meant everything. With the first unlocked funds, she set up a partnership with the Center on Halstead, launching a winter housing and scholarship program for women ages 17 to 23, aging out of foster care. She personally reviewed each application, met with social workers, and insisted that every dollar spent go toward real lives, not headlines. One girl, Maya, reminded Imani of herself at 19, showing up with a cracked phone screen, a printed bus schedule folded in her hoodie pocket, and a tremor in her voice when she asked if it was okay to bring her younger sister to the intake interview. "Of course," Imani had said. "Bring all of you." That night, she stayed late finalizing paperwork, eating a lukewarm empanada from Café Tola while rereading a paragraph Evelyn had once written in her foundation notes. "We don't give people dignity. We protect the space where they never lose it." Imani circled it in pen, then underlined it, then whispered it once to herself, not like a memory, but a vow. A few days later, Silas asked her to meet him near Millennium Park, near the same bench he had stood at after Evelyn's memorial. The wind had finally softened. Snow was melting in the gutters, revealing the lines of the city again. He didn't bring paperwork or flowers or anything ceremonial. Just himself. "I owe you an apology," he said. "Not for crying in front of you, for trying to turn you into a place to hide." Imani didn't interrupt. She let him say it. "You didn't owe me anything, and I kept trying to make you carry pieces of Evelyn that weren't yours." She exhaled slowly, watching the sidewalk like it might split open. "I never hated you," she said, "but I hated how easy it was for you to disappear into sadness and expect someone else to pull you out." He nodded. "I won't ask that again." He reached into his coat and handed her a small key on a leather tag. Not a vault, not a guest room. He met her eyes. Just a house. On East 53rd, near Hyde Park. Smaller, mine. No ghosts. Imani held it without answering, the metal warm from his hand. "Do with it what you want," he said. Imani didn't answer right away. She stared at the key for a long moment, then closed her fingers around it. There was no music swelling behind them, no promise of forever. Just a man stepping aside and a woman choosing herself. She didn't know if she'd ever walk through that door, but she knew she could, and that was more than she'd ever been given before. She walked away slowly, the key in her pocket, her steps unhurried. Later that week, she'd finalize the next round of applications for the foundation, draft her first official statement for the website, and sign the lease for an office near University of Chicago Medicine. But in that moment, she just allowed herself to feel it. Not victory, not closure, catharsis. The kind that doesn't erase what came before, but lets it stop bleeding. This had never been about saving Silas. Not really. It had been about not letting his world consume hers. And somehow, in protecting her soul, she'd ended up building something Evelyn never got the chance to finish. A life held up by truth, not silence. What did you think Imani should have done the moment she read Evelyn's warning? Walk away, or stay and uncover the truth? Drop your answer in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, how would you rate this story of loyalty, danger, and redemption in Chicago? Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next chapter gets even darker and the truth doesn't stay buried for long.